Right outside the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C., two young Israeli diplomats, Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lishinsky, were gunned down at close range. They weren't military officers or agents of war. They were participants at a reception dedicated in brutal irony to alleviating the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. They'd come in peace to talk of aid and cross-border cooperation, and they died in an act of ideological murder. Their killer, Elias Rodriguez, a 30-year-old man from Chicago, entered the museum moments later, feigning trauma, only to unfurl a red keffiyeh and chant Free Palestine, Intifada, Revolution. It was theatre, tragic, delusional, and deadly. Sharon and Yaron were not anonymous figures. They were a couple on the cusp of engagement. He had just purchased a ring. They were, in every human sense, the best of us. Young, idealistic, working in diplomacy to forge bridges in a world obsessed with tearing them down. And to speak now in the past tense is not only heartbreaking, it's obscene. Rodriguez, a former activist loosely affiliated with far-left organizations, had published an online manifesto the day before, railing against what he called the ineffectiveness of non-violent protest and romanticizing insurrection. His language mimicked that of revolutionaries, but his actions mirrored the logic of terrorism to target civilians in symbolic spaces for maximum political noise. He entered the museum, a place of memory and interfaith dialogue, and turned it into a crime scene. The red keffiyeh he brandished, often associated with Palestinian resistance but now appropriated by extremists, became not a badge of solidarity but a banner of hate. This wasn't protest. This was performance violence designed for spectacle and impact, a desecration of both Palestinian suffering and Jewish lives. And the reaction has been swift, and the FBI called it an act of anti-Semitic terror. The mayor of Washington, the governor of Illinois, and political leaders across the spectrum have condemned the killings. Yet beyond the ritual statements of outrage lies a deeper fracture. Israeli officials, notably Diaspora Affairs Minister Amichai Chichley, directly blamed Western leaders, particularly Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, and Canada's Mark Carney, for emboldening such acts through ambiguous moral signalling over Gaza. That's twaddle. In truth, we're walking a diplomatic tightrope where the defence of human rights in Palestine has sometimes become indistinguishable from incitement against Jews, and words, as ever, have consequences, and it's really important that one makes a distinction between a criticism of Netanyahu's government and support for Israel and support for the Jewish people. And equally, it's important that we make it clear that while support for Gaza and Palestine is or should be absolute, condemnation of the Hamas terrorism should be absolute. And Israel's actions in Gaza have caused immense suffering. Civilian deaths are harrowing, but when justifiable outrage is harnessed by those who mask bloodlust as political solidarity, we slide into something much darker. And there is so much opportunity to do so, and it needs to be resisted. There's a grotesque symmetry at play. Just as Israeli bombs fall on hospitals in Khan Yunis, bullets fly in Washington at those working to prevent precisely such tragedies. Two tragedies, neither justifiable, but one used to excuse the other. That is the abyss. And the shooting didn't take place in a war zone. It took place in a capital city meant to embody democratic decency. The killer chose a Jewish museum, not an embassy compound. That too is symbolic. Not a protest, but a persecution. So where do we stand? To say Free Palestine cannot be a license to spill Jewish blood. To criticize Netanyahu must not slip into blaming Jews collectively for the actions of a state and a prime minister who is, let's put it frankly, out of control. To criticize Netanyahu is not necessarily wrong, and to mourn Palestine doesn't require silence when Jews are murdered. There's not time for whataboutery. It's time for moral clarity. If your clarity ends at the border of your ideology, it's not solidarity, it's tribalism. Rodriguez's act was not pro-Palestinian, it was anti-human. It damaged the very cause it purported to support by weaponizing it into murder. So we should honour the memory of Sarah Milgram and Yaron Leshinsky, not with platitudes but with purpose, and draw moral lines that don't shift with sentiment. And remember that peace cannot be built on the graves of idealists, nor on the silence of those who know better and say nothing. There are two major wars at the moment, and both of them need to be stopped. And both of them need to be stopped so that the dignity of the people, of the civilians who are suffering, can be preserved. And the two-state solution, as far as I can see, is the only solution that commands any sense in Israel and Gaza. Just as the withdrawal of Putin's forces from the four oblasts and an agreement that is reached over Crimea, which probably means a withdrawal from Putin's forces from Crimea too, is the only possible solution. There isn't any other solution. You don't reward you don't reward an aggressive invasion, just as you don't reward terrorism.